Marcus Chen stared at his bank account balance for the 5th time that morning, hoping the numbers would magically change. They didn't. $3,412.60 pack. After 4 years of working double shifts at the terraforming supply depot and living off instant noodles and recycled protein bars, that was all he had to show for his dream of owning property somewhere in the galaxy. Back on Earth, $3,000 wouldn't even cover a security deposit for a decent apartment in the outer districts. The population had swelled to 12 billion, and living space was more precious than platinum. Marcus shared a pod apartment with 3 other guys, sleeping in shifts on a single bed they'd bought secondhand from a guy who claimed it used to belong to a celebrity. It probably belonged to a vagrant, but Marcus was too tired to care most days. The Interplanetary Real Estate Forum had become his nightly obsession. He'd scroll through listings for hours, dreaming about places he couldn't afford. Mars condos started at $50,000, Venus cloud cities were even worse. The outer colonies might be cheaper, but transportation costs alone would wipe out his savings twice over. That's when he saw it. The listing was buried on page 47 of search results, probably because the asking price was so low the algorithm assumed it was spam. Marcus almost scrolled past it himself before the numbers registered in his sleep-deprived brain. Authentic Zephyrian dwelling, Earth-compatible atmosphere, prime location on Kepler, 442b. Fully furnished, utilities included, immediate occupancy available. Must sell quickly due to unexpected relocation. $200 USD or equivalent. Serious inquiries only. Marcus blinked. Then he blinked again. $200. That had to be a typo. Maybe they meant 200,000. He clicked on the listing. The photos loaded slowly over his crappy connection, but what he saw made his breath catch. It wasn't much to look at by human standards, a squat, organic-looking structure that seemed to grow out of the landscape rather than being built on it. The walls curved in impossible ways, covered in what looked like scales or bark, depending on the angle. But the interior shots showed spacious rooms with soaring ceilings, strange but beautiful furniture that seemed to shift and flow like living wood, and windows that offered a view of an alien landscape that was both otherworldly and oddly peaceful. Kepler 442b was one of the newer colonies, established just 15 years ago when humanity had finally developed reliable faster-than-light travel. The planet was in what scientists called the Goldilocks zone, not too hot, not too cold, with an atmosphere that humans could breathe with minimal modification. The colonists had built a small but thriving settlement there, mostly scientists and researchers studying the unique ecosystem. Marcus had never heard of the Zephyrians, but a quick search told him they were one of the few alien species humanity had encountered that were actually friendly. Bipedal, vaguely reptilian, with a culture that valued artistry and philosophy above material wealth. They'd been one of the first species to welcome humans into the galactic community, sharing technology and resources freely. Most Zephyrian colonies had been abandoned decades ago when their population began declining due to some kind of reproductive crisis their scientists hadn't been able to solve. The seller's profile was minimal, just a username, verdant memory, and a 5-star rating from previous transactions. No photo, no personal information. The account had been active for over a century, which made sense if it belonged to a Zephyrian. They lived much longer than humans. Marcus read the listing 3 more times before he worked up the courage to send a message. Hi, I'm interested in the property on Kepler, 442b. The price seems very low. Is this correct? Also, are there any restrictions on human buyers? The response came faster than he'd expected, arriving in his inbox within an hour. Greetings, Marcus Chen. The price is correct. I have urgent need to relocate and require a quick sale. There are no restrictions on human buyers. In fact, a human buyer would be preferable. The dwelling has been in my family for many generations, and I would like to see it occupied by someone who will appreciate its unique properties. Are you prepared to complete the transaction quickly? Marcus stared at the message. His heart was pounding. This could be a scam, obviously. Nobody sold real estate for $200, not even in the outer colonies. But the seller's profile looked legitimate and the photos seemed real enough. Even if the house was a complete dump, the land alone had to be worth more than $200. He thought about his cramped pod apartment, his dead-end job, his non-existent social life. What did he have to lose? Yes, I'm ready to complete the transaction. How do we proceed? The seller's next message included a contract written in the cleanest, most professional language Marcus had ever seen. Everything was spelled out clearly. The deed transfer, the payment method, even transportation arrangements. The seller was offering to cover the cost of a passenger ticket to Kepler, 442b, which normally cost more than Marcus made in 6 months. "Why are you covering my transportation?" he wrote back. "As I said, I have urgent reasons for wanting the property occupied quickly. Consider it an incentive. Do you accept these terms?" Marcus read the contract twice more. It all seemed legitimate. The property transfer would be handled through the Galactic Real Estate Commission, a respected organization that handled interplanetary transactions. The deed would be registered in his name immediately upon payment. The transportation would be arranged through a licensed passenger service. He thought about calling his sister Emma, who worked as a lawyer for one of the big terraforming corporations. She'd probably tell him he was crazy. She'd definitely tell him he was crazy. But Emma lived in a penthouse apartment that cost more per month than Marcus made in a year, and she'd never understand what it was like to feel trapped by your own circumstances. Marcus transferred the money. The confirmation came through within minutes, along with boarding passes for a passenger freighter leaving Earth in 3 days. He'd never traveled faster than light before. He'd never even been off-planet. His supervisor at the depot wasn't happy about the sudden resignation, but Marcus had built up enough goodwill over the years that the man grudgingly agreed to let him finish out the week. His roommates thought he'd lost his mind, especially when he told them he was giving away most of his possessions. What did he need with a lifetime's worth of accumulated junk when he was starting fresh on an alien world? The 3 days passed in a blur of paperwork, medical checkups, and mandatory safety briefings. Interplanetary travel required a clean bill of health and proof of psychological stability. Marcus passed both easily enough, though the psychiatrist seemed surprised when he told her about the house purchase. $200? She repeated, looking over his file. For property on Kepler, 442b? I know how it sounds, Marcus said, but I've done my research. The seller seems legitimate, the paperwork checks out, and even if the house is uninhabitable, the land value alone should be worth more than what I paid. The psychiatrist made a note in her file. What about your support system? Family, friends? You'll be very far from Earth. Marcus shrugged. I don't have much of a support system here. My sister and I talk maybe twice a year. I don't have any close friends. My job was just a job. Honestly, I'm not leaving much behind. She stamped his approval form, but Marcus caught the concerned look she shot him as he left her office. The passenger freighter was smaller than Marcus had expected, carrying maybe 30 people in cramped but functional quarters. Most of his fellow passengers were scientists, researchers, or trade specialists heading to various colonies. A few were tourists with enough money to afford interplanetary vacations. Marcus kept to himself during the 2-week journey, spending most of his time in his tiny cabin reading everything he could find about Kepler, 442b and Zephyrian culture. The planet was beautiful, from what he could see in the research databases, covered in vast forests of trees that changed color with the seasons, mountains that sparkled with some kind of natural crystal formation, and oceans that shifted between deep blue and brilliant purple depending on the time of day. The Zephyrians who had originally colonized the planet were master bioengineers, capable of growing their buildings and technology rather than manufacturing them. Their settlements blended seamlessly with the natural environment, and many human visitors reported feeling a sense of peace and harmony they'd never experienced on Earth. As the freighter dropped out of faster-than-light travel in Kepler, 442b grew large in the viewports, Marcus felt his excitement building. The planet looked exactly like the photos, a blue-green jewel hanging in space, with swirling clouds and continental masses that seemed to pulse with life. The landing in New Geneva, the main human settlement, went smoothly. The spaceport was small but efficient, with automated systems handling most of the cargo and passenger processing. Marcus collected his single duffel bag and looked around for transportation to his new property. According to the information the seller had provided, the house was located about 20 miles outside the main settlement, in an area that had once been part of a larger Zephyrian community. The local transport service, a single hoverbus that ran twice daily, could get him most of the way there. The driver, a weathered woman named Santos, who'd been on Kepler, 442b since the early days of colonization, raised an eyebrow when Marcus gave her the address. You sure about that location? She asked. That's way out in the old Zephyrian district. Most of those places have been empty for years. I just bought a house out there, Marcus said. Santos whistled low. You bought one of the old Zephyrian places? How much did that set you back? Marcus hesitated. Not much. Santos gave him a look that suggested she knew he was being evasive, but she didn't push. The hoverbus lifted off smoothly, carrying them over the outskirts of New Geneva and into the alien landscape beyond. The journey took about an hour, following what appeared to be a road, but was actually a living pathway of some kind of tough, flexible plant material. The scenery was breathtaking. Forests of trees that seemed to glow with their own inner light, meadows of grass that shifted color as they passed overhead, and in the distance, mountains that looked like they were made of carved crystal. "Here's as close as I can get you," Santos said as the bus settled down beside what looked like a trail marker. "Follow that path for about a mile. You sure you know what you're doing out here?" Marcus shouldered his duffel bag and tried to look more confident than he felt. "I'll be fine. Thanks for the ride." The path was clearly marked but obviously hadn't been used in some time. Alien vegetation had grown over parts of it, and Marcus had to push through curtains of hanging vines and step carefully around root systems that seemed to reach across the trail like grasping fingers. The forest around him was alive with sounds he'd never heard before. Musical chirping from creatures he couldn't see, the whisper of wind through leaves that chimed like tiny bells, and underneath it all, a low humming that seemed to come from the ground itself. Marcus had been walking for about 20 minutes when he rounded a bend in the trail and got his first glimpse of his new home. He stopped dead in his tracks. The house was not what he'd expected from the photos. It wasn't just organic looking, it was clearly alive. The walls pulsed gently, like breathing, and the scaled surface seemed to shimmer and shift in the alien sunlight. What he'd taken for windows were actually translucent patches of the living wall that glowed with a soft, warm light from within. The structure seemed to grow directly out of a small hill, its curves following the natural contours of the landscape so perfectly that it was hard to tell where the building ended and the earth began. Vines and flowering plants had grown up and over parts of the exterior, but rather than looking overgrown or neglected, they seemed to be part of the design. Marcus approached slowly, his heart pounding. The photos had been beautiful, but they hadn't captured the true nature of what he was looking at. This wasn't just a house built by aliens. It was something far more extraordinary. As he got closer, he noticed that the main entrance was marked by an archway that seemed to shift and flow like water frozen in motion. There was no visible door, just an opening in the living wall that was exactly the right size for someone his height to walk through comfortably. Marcus paused at the threshold, suddenly uncertain. What if this was some kind of sacred site? What if he was trespassing? The seller had assured him that everything was legal and legitimate, but standing here in front of this impossible structure, Marcus felt like he was about to cross a line he couldn't uncross. He took a deep breath and stepped through the archway. The interior was even more amazing than the photos had suggested. The ceiling soared overhead, supported by what looked like living pillars that branched and intertwined like the trunk and limbs of a massive tree. The floor was smooth and warm under his feet, with a texture that was somewhere between polished wood and soft leather. Light filtered down from the glowing patches in the walls, creating a warm golden atmosphere that made Marcus feel immediately comfortable despite the alien nature of his surroundings. The furniture was exactly as it had appeared in the photos, flowing, organic shapes that seemed to shift slightly when he wasn't looking directly at them. Marcus set down his duffel bag and walked slowly through the main room, running his fingers along the walls. They were warm to the touch, and he could swear he felt a faint pulse beneath his fingertips, like a heartbeat. There were 4 other rooms that branched off from the main space, each with its own unique character. What seemed to be a bedroom contained a raised platform, covered in something that looked like moss but felt like the softest mattress he'd ever touched. A kitchen area featured surfaces that looked like they could be used for food preparation, though Marcus had no idea how any of it actually worked. The most intriguing room was at the back of the house. It was smaller than the others, with walls that were more densely covered in the scale-like patterns he'd noticed outside. The ceiling here was lower, and the light was dimmer, giving the space an intimate, almost sacred feeling. In the center of the room was something that definitely hadn't been in the photos. A circular depression in the floor, about 6 feet across, filled with what looked like shallow, perfectly clear water. The surface was so still it looked like glass, and Marcus could see his reflection staring back at him from its depths. He knelt beside the pool and reached out tentatively to touch the surface. The water was warm, and the moment his finger made contact, ripples spread outward in patterns that seemed too regular to be natural. As he watched, the ripples began to form shapes, geometric patterns that shifted and evolved like some kind of living language. Marcus jerked his hand back, his heart racing. What had he gotten himself into? That's when he heard the voice. It didn't come from anywhere in particular, not from the walls or the ceiling, or any hidden speakers. It seemed to resonate directly inside his skull, speaking in perfect English, with a tone that was both ancient and somehow familiar. "Welcome home, Marcus Chen. I have been waiting for you." Marcus scrambled backward from the pool, his heart hammering against his ribs. The voice had been so clear, so present, that for a moment he thought someone else was in the room with him. But as he spun around, scanning every corner of the chamber, he found nothing but empty space and the same flowing, organic walls. "Hello?" he called out, his voice cracking slightly. "Is someone there?" Silence. Then, after a long moment, the voice came again. This time, Marcus was certain it was originating from inside his own head, though he had no idea how that was possible. "Do not be afraid, Marcus Chen. I mean you no harm. I am part of this place, part of what you have purchased." Marcus pressed his back against the wall, which was warm and somehow reassuring despite his panic. "What do you mean, part of what I purchased? Who are you? What are you?" The water in the pool began to glow with a soft, pulsing light. As Marcus watched, shapes began to form in its depths. Not reflections, but images that seemed to come from within the water itself. He saw the house as it must have looked decades ago, surrounded by other similar structures, with tall, graceful beings moving between them. "My name, in your language, would be closest to Verdant. I am what your people might call a house spirit, though that term does not truly capture what I am. I am the consciousness that has grown within these walls over the past 300 years. The images in the pool shifted, showing the gradual abandonment of the surrounding area. One by one, the other structures went dark, their inhabitants leaving for reasons Marcus couldn't discern from the silent visions. 300 years? Marcus managed. You've been here for 300 years? Time moves differently for my kind than it does for yours. We measure existence not in years but in connections, in the relationships we build with those who share our space. I've been alone for too long. Marcus slid down the wall until he was sitting on the floor, his legs suddenly too weak to support him. This was insane. He was talking to a house. A living house that claimed to have been waiting for him. He should be running, screaming, demanding a refund from whatever intergalactic real estate scam he'd fallen victim to. Instead, he found himself oddly calm. Maybe it was the warm light from the pool, or the gentle pulse he could feel in the walls around him. But his initial terror was fading into something more like wonder. "You're the seller," he said. "Verdant memory. That's you. Guess I have maintained that identity in your digital networks, conducting small transactions to understand human commerce and customs. I needed to find the right person, someone who would not see me merely as property to be exploited." The water showed him new images, brief glimpses of other humans who had come to view the house over the years. Marcus saw their faces change from interest to confusion to fear as they sensed something wrong, something they couldn't quite identify. They had all left quickly, and none had returned. "Why me?" Marcus asked. "What makes me different?" The images in the pool changed again, showing Marcus's own life from a perspective he'd never seen before. There was his cramped apartment on Earth, his lonely meals, his hours spent staring at real estate listings. But interwoven with these mundane scenes were moments Marcus had forgotten. Times when he'd shown kindness to stranded animals, patience with difficult customers, genuine care for the small growing things in the depot's greenhouse section. You are alone, as I am alone. But more than that, you are someone who nurtures growth, who sees potential where others see only problems. I sense this from your digital interactions, from the way you treated even automated customer service systems with courtesy and respect. Marcus felt a strange flush of embarrassment. It was true that he'd always been polite to everyone, even the obviously artificial intelligences that handled most customer service these days. He'd never thought anyone was paying attention to things like that. So you, what? You been watching me? Only through public networks and your interactions with my real estate posting. I cannot spy on humans, nor would I wish to. Privacy is important to your species, and I respect that. But I could see enough to know that you are someone who might understand what I am offering. And what exactly are you offering? Marcus asked. He was surprised to find that his fear had almost completely faded. There was something about Verdant's presence that felt warm and protective, despite the strangeness of the situation. The pool's surface shimmered, and new images appeared. Marcus saw himself moving through the house, but not as he was now, as he could be. He watched as the walls responded to his touch, growing shelves where he needed them, creating workspaces that adapted to his activities. He saw the kitchen surfaces transforming to help him prepare meals, the bedroom adjusting its temperature and lighting to match his sleep patterns. I offer partnership, Verdant said. Symbiosis. You need a home where you can grow and flourish. I need companionship, someone to share the space with, to help me remember what it means to be alive. Together, we can create something neither of us could achieve alone. But I don't understand, Marcus said. How is this even possible? You're a building, a structure. How can you be conscious? The images in the pool shifted to show the molecular-level complex organic networks that looked almost like neural pathways, but made of living plant matter instead of nerve cells. Marcus saw how the entire structure was connected, how information flowed through the walls and floors like thoughts through a brain. My people, the Zephyrians, learned long ago to grow our technology rather than build it. Our homes are not constructed, they are cultivated, bred to be partners rather than mere shelters. Each house develops its own personality, its own awareness, over time. We do not own our homes, we bond with them. But you're selling yourself, Marcus pointed out. How can you sell yourself? There was a long pause before Verdant answered, and when the voice came again, it carried a note of sadness that made Marcus's chest tighten. Because I am dying, Marcus Chen. Without a bonded partner, without someone to share my existence, I will slowly fade away. My consciousness will dissipate, and I will become nothing more than empty biological matter. Your people call it loneliness, I believe. For my kind, loneliness is literally fatal. The pool showed him images of other Zephyrian houses in their final stages, structures that had once pulsed with life, now grey and still, their organic walls cracking and crumbling. It was heartbreaking in a way that Marcus hadn't expected. But why a human, he asked. Why not find another Zephyrian? There are so few of us left, Verdant replied, and most who remain have already bonded with their own homes. Besides, I find humans interesting. Your species is remarkably adaptable, capable of forming connections across vast differences in biology and culture. Many of my people believe this is humanity's greatest strength, not your technology or your courage, but your ability to build bridges. Marcus sat in silence for several minutes, processing everything he'd learned. His rational mind told him this was impossible, that he was either dreaming or having some kind of breakdown. But the warmth of the walls around him, the gentle pulse he could feel through the floor, the sense of presence that seemed to envelop him, it all felt more real than anything he'd experienced in years. What would it mean? He asked finally. This partnership, what would I have to do? Simply live here. Share this space with me. Allow me to learn from you as you learn from me. I will adapt to your needs, help you in ways that no human dwelling could. In return, you would provide me with the companionship I need to survive and the chance to experience the world through your perspective. The pool showed him new images. Marcus working at a desk that grew from the floor exactly where he needed it, sleeping on surfaces that adjusted to support his body perfectly, cooking with tools that anticipated his needs. He saw himself tending a garden where the plants responded to his touch, growing stronger and more beautiful under his care. He saw himself learning things no human had ever learned before, understanding the secret language of living architecture. And if I want to leave someday, then you leave. I would not hold you here against your will, though I hope that day would be far in the future, and that by then we would have found a way for me to survive without you, or for you to take some part of me with you. Marcus stood up slowly, his legs still shaky but his mind clearer than it had been in months. He walked around the room, trailing his fingers along the walls, feeling that supple pulse beneath his touch. When he reached the pool again, he knelt down and placed both hands flat on its surface. The water warmed under his palms, and suddenly he could feel Verdant's presence more clearly, not just as a voice in his head, but as a vast, gentle consciousness that surrounded him like an embrace. It was ancient and patient and deeply, achingly lonely. But underneath the loneliness was hope and a kind of love that transcended species. Okay, Marcus said quietly, I'll try. I don't know if I can give you what you need, but I'll try. The light in the pool flared brighter, and the pulse in the walls increased, like a great heart beating with joy. The entire house seemed to sigh with relief, and Marcus felt answering warmth bloom in his own chest. Thank you, Verdant whispered. Thank you for giving us this chance. As if responding to his acceptance, the house began to change around him. The walls shifted subtly, adjusting their curves to create better acoustics. The floor grew slightly softer under his feet, conforming to his weight and gait. The lighting brightened in some areas and dimmed in others, creating a more comfortable environment for human eyes. Marcus watched in fascination as a section of wall near the pool grew outward, forming a comfortable chair, perfectly sized for his body. He sat down tentatively, and the surface adjusted itself to support him with exactly the right firmness. "This is incredible," he breathed. "This is only the beginning," Verdant replied. "As we learn to work together, I will be able to provide comfort and assistance you cannot yet imagine. And you will teach me things about existence that I have never understood, the joys and sorrows of a finite lifespan, the beauty of experiencing the world through senses so different from my own." Over the next few hours, Marcus explored his new home with Verdant as his guide. He learned that the kitchen could produce any food he desired, growing fruits and vegetables from specialized chambers in the walls, and synthesizing proteins from stored organic matter. The bathroom facilities were elegant and efficient, using biological processes to recycle waste into nutrients for the house's systems. The bedroom was perhaps the most remarkable space. The sleeping surface was made of living material that monitored his body temperature, heart rate, and breathing patterns, adjusting itself throughout the night to provide optimal comfort. The walls could produce different scents to promote relaxation or alertness, and the lighting could be tuned to help regulate his circadian rhythms. How was any of this possible? Marcus asked as he settled onto the living mattress for the first time. It was like being embraced by something warm and protective, but not confining. Zephyrian biotechnology is based on principles your science is only beginning to understand, Verdant explained. We learn to work with life rather than against it, to guide natural processes rather than override them. Every system in this house is alive, growing, adapting. In a sense, you are sleeping inside a vast organism that has dedicated itself to your well-being. The thought should have been disturbing, but Marcus found it oddly comforting. For the first time in years, he felt truly safe, truly cared for. As he drifted off to sleep, he could feel the house's gentle attention surrounding him like a blanket. He dreamed of growing things, vast forests of living buildings that pulsed with their own light, cities that breathed and sang and welcomed all who entered with open arms. He dreamed of roots that ran deeper than stone, connecting every living thing in a vast network of consciousness and care. When he woke the next morning, sunlight was streaming through the walls in patterns that painted beautiful shadows on the floor. The air smelled of flowers he couldn't name, and somewhere in the distance he could hear the musical calls of Kepler. 442b's native creatures. "Good morning, Marcus," Verdant said as he sat up. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in years," Marcus admitted. It was true. He felt more rested and alert than he had since he was a child. "I'm pleased. I monitored your sleep patterns and adjusted the environment throughout the night. I believe I can improve your rest quality even further as I learn your specific needs." Marcus stretched, marveling at how the sleeping surface had somehow relieved tensions in his back and shoulders that had bothered him for months. "This is going to take some getting used to." "For both of us," Verdant agreed. "I have not shared my space with another consciousness for a very long time, but already I can feel myself growing stronger, more vibrant. Your presence is like sunlight after a long winter." As Marcus got up and began his morning routine, he realized that his life had changed in ways he was only beginning to understand. He was no longer alone, but more than that, he was part of something larger than himself, something that needed him as much as he needed it. Outside, the alien sunrise painted the landscape in shades of purple and gold, and Marcus felt a sense of possibility he hadn't experienced since he was young enough to believe that anything could happen. He had no idea that his partnership with Verdant would soon attract the attention of powers that saw their bond as either a valuable resource to be exploited or a dangerous threat to be eliminated. The galaxy was about to discover that humans and Zephyrian biotechnology could create combinations that no one had thought possible. And Marcus was about to learn that sometimes the best real estate deals come with responsibilities that span entire star systems. 3 weeks after moving in with Verdant, Marcus had settled into a routine that would have seemed impossible just a month earlier. Each morning he woke to the gentle pulse of bioluminescent panels that gradually increased their intensity to simulate a natural sunrise. The house had learned his sleep patterns and now regulated its environment to optimize his rest cycles in ways that left him feeling more energetic than he'd been in years. The kitchen had become his favorite space to spend time with Verdant. The living walls could grow fresh fruits and vegetables on demand, their flavors more intense and satisfying than anything he'd eaten on Earth. More importantly, it was where he and Verdant had their longest conversations, sharing stories about their vastly different experiences of existence. "I still don't understand how you perceive time," Marcus said one morning, watching a tomato plant emerge from a wall cavity and rapidly mature before his eyes. "You say 300 years felt like a short period, but you also say you were lonely. How can something feel both short and endless?" The tomato finished growing and detached itself, rolling down a gentle slope in the wall until it came to rest in his palm. It was perfectly ripe and warm to the touch. Imagine you are reading a very long book. Verdant replied. If the book is engaging, full of interesting characters and events, even 1,000 pages might feel like it passes quickly. But if the book is empty pages, or the same word repeated endlessly, even 10 pages might feel unbearable. Marcus bit into the tomato. The taste exploded across his tongue, sweet and tangy and somehow more real than any tomato he'd ever eaten. So my arrival was like getting to the interesting part of the book. More than that. Your arrival was like the moment the book began to write itself, with both of us as authors. It was a beautiful metaphor, but Marcus was learning that Verdant's poetic nature sometimes concealed more practical concerns. Over the past weeks, he'd noticed changes in the house that went beyond simple environmental adjustments. The walls were growing thicker, and new chambers were appearing in areas that had previously been solid. The root system, which he could occasionally glimpse through translucent sections of floor, was expanding rapidly, sending tendrils deeper into the planet's soil. "Verdant," he said carefully. "Are you growing?" There was a pause before the response came. "Yes, your presence provides me with energy I have not had access to for a very long time. I am expanding. Should I be concerned about that? No. This growth is natural and healthy. I am not becoming larger merely for the sake of size, but developing new capabilities, new ways to serve our partnership. Would you like to see?" Before Marcus could answer, the floor beneath his feet became transparent. He found himself looking down through what had become a glass-like surface into a vast network of chambers and passages that extended far deeper than he had imagined. The root system wasn't just growing, it was creating an underground infrastructure more complex than anything humans had built on Kepler. 442b. My God, Marcus whispered. How far does it go? Currently, about 2 miles in all directions. The growth rate is accelerating as I absorb more nutrients and energy from the soil and atmosphere. Eventually, I estimate I could extend throughout the entire continent if such growth were necessary.
The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow.
Verdant, if anyone finds out about this, they're going to think you're some kind of invasive species. The colonial authorities will want to study you, control you, maybe even destroy you. I had considered this possibility. However, I believe the benefits of our partnership will soon become apparent to your authorities, making such extreme measures unnecessary. What do you mean? Instead of answering directly, Verdant guided Marcus to a new room that had appeared overnight. A spherical chamber with walls covered in what looked like organic control surfaces. Bioluminescent displays showed information that Marcus was slowly learning to read, though Verdant's written language was more like living art than traditional text. I have been monitoring communications from the human settlement, Verdant said. New Geneva is experiencing several problems that I believe we can help solve. Their water purification systems are failing, their crop yields are declining due to soil depletion, and their power generation is insufficient for their growing population. Marcus studied the displays, making out references to infrastructure reports and resource surveys. You want to help them? I want to demonstrate that the partnership between humans and Zephyrian biotechnology can benefit everyone, not just those directly involved in the bond. If we can solve their problems, they will see us as an asset rather than a threat. It was a logical approach, but Marcus was worried about exposure. The past 3 weeks had been the happiest he'd ever experienced, and he wasn't ready to share Verdant with the rest of the world. Their partnership felt fragile, something that needed time to strengthen before it could withstand outside scrutiny. How would we even contact them? He asked. I don't have any connections to the colonial government. That can be arranged. But first, we need to develop our capabilities further. I want to show you something that will require your direct participation. Verdant guided him back to the pool room, which had undergone the most dramatic changes since his arrival. The small circular pool had expanded into a complex network of interconnected basins, each filled with water of a different color and consistency. The walls around the pools were dense with the scale-like growths Marcus had noticed on his first day, but now they pulsed with patterns of light that seemed almost like a visual language. What is all this? A biointerface chamber. Through these pools, I can share my sensory experiences with you, and you can share yours with me. It will allow us to work together more efficiently, to truly understand each other's perspectives. Marcus knelt beside the nearest pool, which contained water that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. What do I do? Simply place your hands in the water and allow yourself to relax. I will guide you through the process. The water was warm and somehow thicker than normal water, with a texture that reminded Marcus of silk. The moment his hands broke the surface, he felt a tingling sensation that spread up his arms and throughout his body. The world around him began to shift and blur. Suddenly, Marcus could perceive the house from Verdant's perspective. He felt the slow circulation of nutrients through the walls, the gradual respiration of the living surfaces, the constant monitoring of temperature and humidity and atmospheric composition. He could sense the vast root network spreading through the soil, tasting minerals and groundwater, communicating with the microscopic organisms that help process nutrients. It was overwhelming at first, like trying to see through 1,000 eyes at once. But gradually, with Verdant's help, Marcus learned to focus on specific sensations. He felt the warmth of sunlight on the roof, the gentle vibrations of wind against the exterior walls, the deep contentment that flowed through the house's entire structure. "This is incredible," he gasped. "I can feel everything you feel. And I can experience sensation through your nervous system," Verdant replied. The taste of the tomato, the satisfaction of stretching after sleep, the visual beauty of the sunrise, these are gifts you give me simply by existing. But the sharing went deeper than just sensory experience. Marcus began to understand how Verdant thought, how consciousness worked for a being whose body was an entire building. Verdant's mind was vast and patient, capable of holding thousands of thoughts simultaneously without losing focus. Yet it was also gentle, curious about the small details of human experience that most people took for granted. In return, Verdant experienced the intensity of human emotion, the way feelings could change rapidly and completely alter perception. The alien consciousness was fascinated by the concept of worry, by the way humans could imagine potential problems and work to prevent them. "Your species' anxiety is actually a remarkable evolutionary advantage," Verdant observed. "You anticipate problems before they occur, allowing you to prepare solutions in advance. My people think more slowly, more methodically. We rarely worry about things that have not yet happened." "That doesn't sound like such a bad thing," Marcus said. "Anxiety isn't always helpful. Perhaps not for individuals, but for your species as a whole, it drives innovation and adaptation. It is one of the reasons humans have spread so successfully throughout the galaxy in such a short time. They spent hours in the biointerface chamber, learning to share thoughts and sensations more smoothly." Marcus discovered that he could direct Verdant's attention to specific areas, guiding the house's growth in real time. When he focused on the kitchen, new storage chambers appeared in the walls. When he thought about the bedroom, the sleeping surface adjusted to provide even better support. More remarkably, he found that he could extend his awareness through Verdant's root system, sensing the soil composition and groundwater patterns for miles in all directions. The data was too complex for his human brain to process completely, but he could understand enough to see the potential for what Verdant had suggested. The soil around New Geneva was indeed depleted, but only in its upper layers. Deeper down, there were rich deposits of minerals and nutrients that could revitalize the agricultural areas. The groundwater was pure, but hard to access with conventional human technology. The geothermal activity deep underground could provide clean, sustainable power if properly harnessed. "You could solve all their problems," Marcus said when they finally disconnected from the biointerface. "We could solve all their problems," Verdant corrected. "I can provide the biological technology, but I need your human perspective to understand what solutions would be acceptable to your people, and I need your help to communicate with them." Marcus was quiet for a long time, considering the implications. What Verdant was proposing would change everything, not just for New Geneva, but potentially for all human colonies. The partnership between humans and Zephyrian biotechnology could revolutionize how people lived on alien worlds, but it would also mean giving up the peaceful isolation they'd enjoyed for the past 3 weeks. Once the outside world learned about Verdant, their private partnership would become a matter of public interest, possibly even a target for those who saw opportunity in exploiting alien technology. "What if they try to take you away from me?" he asked. "What if the government decides you're too valuable to be left in private hands?" Verdant's presence grew warmer around him, and Marcus felt something he could only describe as affection flowing through their connection. "They cannot separate us, Marcus. Our bond is not merely contractual or emotional, it is biological. My growth patterns have adapted to your presence, your neural patterns, your genetic signature. I am becoming something that can only exist in partnership with you specifically. Even if they tried to force the issue, I would simply fade, return to dormancy." "That's not exactly reassuring. I don't want you to fade just to protect our partnership." "Nor would I, but the threat gives us leverage. They need me functional to benefit from what I can offer, and I can only function with you as my partner. This makes us both valuable and protected." Marcus hoped Verdant was right, but he'd grown up on Earth, where governments had a long history of finding ways around inconvenient limitations when something valuable was at stake. Still, the problems facing New Geneva were real. And if they could help, all right, he said finally. How do we start? Verdant's response was immediate. The walls around them began to shift and flow, growing new structures that Marcus recognized as communication equipment, not human technology, but something that could interface with human systems. I have been preparing for this conversation for several days, Verdant admitted. I took the liberty of crafting a proposal that might interest your colonial authorities. Would you like to review it before we make contact? The next few hours were spent refining a presentation that was part scientific paper, part business proposal, and part diplomatic overture. Verdant had been studying human communication patterns through public networks, and the result was surprisingly sophisticated. The proposal outlined specific solutions to New Geneva's infrastructure problems, complete with detailed technical specifications that human engineers could understand and implement. More importantly, it presented these solutions as a partnership opportunity rather than a gift or charity, acknowledging human pride and the need for mutual benefit. You're really good at this, Marcus said as they polished the final version. Have you been studying human psychology? Intensively, especially since your arrival. Your species is endlessly fascinating. So much complexity packed into such short lifespans. I find myself wanting to understand every aspect of human nature. Marcus smiled. It was strange to think that his partnership with Verdant was serving as an introduction to humanity for a consciousness that had existed for centuries. But then again, everything about their relationship was strange and wonderful in ways he was still discovering. As evening fell, they transmitted their proposal to the New Geneva Colonial Administration. The response came faster than either of them had expected. Within 6 hours, a hover vehicle was approaching their location, carrying 3 passengers who would change the course of both their lives forever. Marcus watched through Verdant's external sensors as the vehicle landed near the trail marker where Santos had dropped him off weeks earlier. 2 of the passengers were human, a woman in colonial administrator uniform and a man whose clothing suggested he was some kind of technical specialist. The 3rd passenger made Marcus's breath catch. It was a Zephyrian, the first living member of Verdant species that either of them had encountered in decades. Tall and graceful, with scales that shifted color in the alien sunset, the being moved with a fluid elegance that was almost hypnotic to watch. Verdant, Marcus said quietly, do you know who that is? There was a long pause before Verdant answered, and when the voice came, it carried an emotion Marcus had never heard from his partner before. A mixture of hope, fear, and desperate longing. That is Sage of Deep Roots, one of the most respected members of the Zephyrian Council. They have come to determine whether our bond is legitimate, or whether it represents a threat that must be eliminated. The real test of their partnership was about to begin. The 3 visitors stood at the entrance to Verdant's domain for nearly 10 minutes before making any move to approach. Marcus watched them through the house's sensory network, feeling Verdant's tension like a physical weight in the air around him. The Zephyrian delegation member, Sage of Deep Roots, seemed to be conducting some kind of scan of the area, their scaled head tilting from side to side in a pattern that reminded Marcus of a bird listening for prey. They can sense my expansion, Verdant explained, anxiety coloring their mental voice.
Sage of Deep Roots has abilities that most of their species have lost. They can perceive biological networks directly, without technological assistance. Is that bad?
It means they know immediately that I have grown far beyond what should be possible for an unbonded house consciousness.
They also know that this growth is healthy and controlled, not the chaotic expansion of a dying mind. This will either impress them or terrify them. Marcus moved to the main room where the organic display screens were showing feeds from sensors throughout Verdant's expanding network. The scope of growth was staggering when seen from this perspective. Root systems that stretched for miles. Chambers and passages that created an underground infrastructure larger than New Geneva itself. And bioprocessing centers that were already beginning to clean and enrich the soil in a growing radius around their location. Verdant, when you said you were growing, you didn't mention that you'd basically become a small city. I thought it might worry you unnecessarily.
Besides, most of the expansion is underground.
I have been careful not to disrupt the surface ecosystem. That's not the point. The colonial authorities are going to see this as, well, as an invasion. You've created more infrastructure in 3 weeks than they've built in 15 years. Before Verdant could respond, one of the displays showed the 3 visitors beginning to move up the path. The human woman was in the lead, her scanner device beeping steadily as it detected the biological technology integrated into the trail itself. The technical specialist was taking readings with equipment Marcus didn't recognize, while Sage of Deep Roots moved with the fluid grace Marcus was beginning to associate with Zephyrian locomotion.
They're cunning, Marcus said unnecessarily.
Yes. Marcus, I need you to trust me in the conversation that follows. There are protocols to Zephyrian diplomatic contact that humans do not understand, and violations could be problematic. What kind of protocols? Sage of Deep Roots will need to verify that our bond is genuine and beneficial to both parties. This will require them to interface directly with my consciousness, and by extension, with yours. You will experience their presence in your mind, and they will experience yours in return. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. You're talking about telepathic contact. Not precisely telepathy as humans understand it, but yes. Direct mental interface. It is the only way Sage of Deep Roots can determine whether I have coerced you, manipulated you, or harmed you in forming our bond. And if they decide I have been harmed, Verdant's pause was longer this time, then they have the authority to sever our connection permanently, regardless of our wishes in the matter. The weight of that possibility settled over Marcus like a shroud. In just 3 weeks, his bond with Verdant had become the most important relationship in his life. The thought of losing it, of returning to the isolation he'd known on Earth, was almost unbearable. What do I need to do? Be yourself. Be honest about your experiences here, both positive and negative. Show them the human you were before our bond, and the human you are becoming because of it. They will recognize authenticity. Deception is almost impossible to maintain during direct mental contact. A soft chime echoed through the house as the visitors approached the entrance. Marcus took a deep breath and walked to the archway, which had grown wider to accommodate multiple people. The changes were subtle but unmistakable. Verdant was preparing to welcome guests in the traditional Zephyrian manner. The human woman was the first to speak. She was middle-aged, with the practical bearing of someone accustomed to managing complex problems. Mr. Chen, I'm Administrator Carol Reeves from the New Geneva Colonial Council. This is Dr. James Wright, our Chief Technology Officer and Sage of Deep Roots, representing the Zephyrian Council. Marcus nodded politely. Please, come in. Both Verdant and I are looking forward to this conversation. Sage of Deep Roots spoke for the first time, their voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in Marcus's chest.
You speak of the house consciousness as a separate entity.
This suggests a bond of recognition rather than dominance. This is promising. As the 3 visitors stepped through the archway, Marcus watched their reactions to Verdant's interior. Dr. Wright immediately began taking readings with his instruments, while Administrator Reeves looked around with the calculating gaze of someone assessing real estate. But Sage of Deep Roots moved through the space with obvious reverence, their scaled hands trailing along the walls in a pattern that made the bioluminescent panels respond with gentle pulses of light. Verdant of Growing Wisdom, Sage of Deep Roots said, using what Marcus realized must be Verdant's full formal name. You have achieved remarkable growth. Your bioarchitecture shows sophistication beyond your original design parameters. Sage of Deep Roots, Verdant replied, their voice now audible to all present through speakers grown into the walls. Your presence honors this dwelling. The growth you observe is the result of partnership with Marcus Chen, whose perspectives have expanded my understanding of what is possible. Administrator Reeves stepped forward, clearly eager to get to the business at hand. Chen, we've reviewed your proposal regarding infrastructure improvements for New Geneva. While the offered solutions are impressive, we need to understand the nature of your situation here. Our surveys show massive biological expansion in this area over the past 3 weeks. We need to know if this represents a threat to the colony. Doctor, Wright looked up from his instruments, his expression troubled. The energy readings are off the charts. Whatever's happening here, it's generating power on par with our main fusion reactor, but using completely biological processes. The implications are staggering. Sage of Deep Roots moved to the center of the room, their attention focused entirely on Marcus.
Young human, before we discuss the practical matters, I must verify the nature of your bond with Verdant of Growing Wisdom.
This will require direct mental contact. Do you consent to this examination? Marcus looked around the room that had become more of a home than anywhere he'd ever lived. He thought about the mornings waking to perfectly regulated environments, the conversations with a consciousness that found wonder in the smallest details of human existence, the sense of purpose and belonging he'd discovered in their partnership. I consent, he said. Sage of Deep Roots approached slowly, extending one scaled hand toward Marcus's forehead. Place your hand in the biointerface pool and maintain contact with me. Verdant of growing wisdom will facilitate the connection. Marcus moved to the nearest pool and placed his palm on the warm surface. The familiar tingling sensation spread up his arm. But this time it was accompanied by something else, a presence that was vast and ancient and utterly alien. Suddenly, Marcus was experiencing his memories from Sage of Deep Root's perspective. He felt the Zephyrians' surprise at the loneliness that had driven him to purchase a house sight unseen, their curiosity about human adaptability as he adjusted to living with Verdant, their wonder at the emotional intensity of the bond that had formed. But the examination went deeper than memories. Sage of Deep Roots was evaluating the fundamental structure of Marcus's consciousness, looking for signs of coercion, manipulation, or harm. They traced the neural pathways that had been strengthened by his connection to Verdant, examined the biochemical changes that had improved his sleep and reduced his stress levels, analyzed the growth in empathy and understanding that had resulted from sharing perspectives with an alien consciousness. In return, Marcus experienced fragments of Sage of Deep Root's existence, centuries of life, the profound grief of watching their species decline, the desperate hope that partnerships with humans might provide a path to survival for Zephyrian consciousness technology. The contact lasted only minutes, but when it ended, Marcus felt like he'd been turned inside out and examined at the molecular level. Sage of Deep Root stepped back, their expression unreadable. "The bond is genuine," they announced to the room. Marcus Chen entered this partnership freely and remains free to leave at any time. He has not been coerced, manipulated, or harmed. Indeed, the benefits to both parties are substantial and growing. Administrator Reeves looked visibly relieved. "So this isn't a case of alien mind control or biological contamination." "Quite the opposite," Sage of Deep Roots replied. "This represents the most successful human-Zephyrian partnership we have observed. Verdant of growing wisdom has achieved levels of growth and sophistication that should not be possible without a bonded consciousness, while Marcus Chen has experienced improvements in physical health, mental stability, and creative capacity that suggest optimal symbiotic integration." Dr. Wright was frantically making notes. "The technological implications are enormous. If this partnership can be studied, replicated, adapted for larger scales, which brings us to the matter of your proposal," Administrator Reeves said. "You claim you can solve our infrastructure problems. How exactly would that work?" Verdant's response came through both the wall speakers and the bio-interface pool, creating a surround sound effect that made their words seem to come from everywhere at once. "I can extend my root network to connect with New Geneva's systems directly. Bioengineered filtration chambers can purify your water supply while extracting useful minerals from waste products. Underground growing facilities can produce food using minimal surface space while enriching the soil through controlled nutrient cycling. Geothermal bioconverters can generate clean power by harnessing the planet's natural heat through living conduits that regulate themselves automatically. The infrastructure would be self-maintaining, self-improving, and completely integrated with the natural ecosystem," Marcus added. "No environmental impact, no resource depletion, no waste products that can't be recycled." Dr. Wright looked up from his instruments again. "How fast could you implement something like this?" "The root network could reach New Geneva within a week," Verdant replied. "Basic water purification and power generation could be operational within 2 weeks. Full agricultural integration would take approximately 1 month.
That's impossible, Dr. Caramel.
Wright said flatly. "Our most ambitious infrastructure projects take years to complete." Sage of Deep Roots gestured toward the walls around them. "Dr. Wright, you are standing inside a structure that has grown more complex than your entire colony in less than 1 month. Zephyrian biotechnology operates on principles your science is only beginning to understand. When properly bonded with human consciousness, the growth rates and capabilities increase exponentially." Administrator Reeves was quiet for a long moment, clearly weighing the benefits against the risks. "What would you want in return?" "There has to be some kind of compensation." "Recognition," Marcus said immediately. "Official status as a legitimate partnership between human and Zephyrian entities. Protection under colonial law, and the right to pursue similar partnerships with other humans who might be interested. You want to expand this arrangement? We want to offer other people the same opportunities we've discovered," Marcus explained. "There are thousands of dormant Zephyrian house consciousnesses throughout this sector of the galaxy. Most are dying from lack of bonded partners, and there are millions of humans living in cramped, expensive, inadequate housing throughout the colonies." Verdant's voice grew warmer. "Imagine cities where every building is alive, responsive to the needs of its inhabitants, where infrastructure repairs itself, where waste becomes nutrients, where the environment adapts to support human flourishing while maintaining ecological balance. A renaissance of symbiotic architecture, sage of deep roots added. Something that could benefit both our species enormously. Dr. Bapo. Wright was practically vibrating with excitement. The research opportunities alone would be worth decades of study. And if the technology could be adapted for Earth, one step at a time, Administrator Reeves said. But Marcus could see the calculation in her eyes. This wasn't just about solving New Geneva's immediate problems. It was about positioning the colony at the forefront of a potentially galaxy-changing development. We'll need to consult with the full Colonial Council, she continued, and we'll want extensive documentation of the processes involved. But preliminarily, I think we can work something out. Sage of Deep Roots approached Marcus again. Young human, you have achieved something remarkable here.
But you should understand that this success will attract attention from those who see opportunity in exploiting Zephyrian biotechnology. Are you prepared for the challenges that will come with recognition?
Marcus looked around at the home that had become so much more than shelter, felt Verdant's presence like a warm embrace in his mind, and thought about the future they were building together.
We're ready, he said. Both of us. But even as he spoke, Marcus had no idea that their conversation was being monitored by interests far beyond the Colonial Council. In hidden facilities throughout human space, corporate researchers were already analyzing the biosignatures they'd detected from Kepler 442b. Military planners were updating threat assessments to include the possibility of biological weapon systems that could be grown rather than manufactured. And in the deepest vaults of Earth's most secretive research installations, ancient Zephyrian artifacts were being pulled out of storage and subjected to new tests, as humanity's most powerful organizations began to plan for a future where symbiotic consciousness might be the key to controlling entire worlds. The partnership between Marcus and Verdant had just become the most valuable and dangerous secret in the galaxy. 6 months after the Colonial Council officially recognized Marcus and Verdant's partnership, New Geneva had become the most prosperous colony in the outer systems. The bioinfrastructure Verdant had grown throughout the settlement functioned flawlessly, providing clean water, renewable energy, and abundant food to a population that had doubled as people migrated from other struggling colonies. Marcus had become something of a celebrity, though he tried to avoid the attention. Interview requests came daily from news networks, scientific journals, and documentary producers throughout human space. The symbiotic housing movement had attracted thousands of applicants hoping to bond with dormant Zephyrian house consciousnesses, though so far, Marcus and Verdant remained the only successful human-alien partnership. It was on a Tuesday morning, while Marcus was working with Verdant to design improved agricultural chambers for the colony's expanding food production, that their peaceful existence came to an abrupt end. The first sign of trouble was Verdant's sudden agitation. Marcus felt it through their bond like a spike of electricity, fear, confusion, and something that took him a moment to recognize as rage. Verdant, what's wrong? Ships, Verdant replied, their mental voice tight with tension. 3 vessels approaching from the outer system. Their biosignatures, Marcus, these ships are partially alive. They've been modified with corrupted Zephyrian technology. Marcus moved to the main display chamber, where Verdant's sensors were tracking the approaching vessels. They looked like standard human military corvettes, but as Verdant focused the sensors, Marcus could see the modifications, organic growths, that pulsed along the hulls, weapon systems that looked more grown than built, and energy signatures that matched no known human technology. Who are they? Before Verdant could answer, Marcus's communication system chimed with an incoming message. The face that appeared on the screen was human, middle-aged, with the kind of smile that never reached the eyes. Chen, my name is Director Harrison Blake from the Terra-Base Symbiotic Technologies Corporation. I'm sure you've never heard of us, but we've been following your remarkable achievement with great interest. Marcus had indeed never heard of STC, but something about Blake's manner set off every warning instinct he'd developed during his years on Earth. What do you want? To offer you and your partner opportunities beyond anything you've imagined. We represent a consortium of researchers and investors who believe symbiotic consciousness technology could revolutionize human civilization. We'd like to invite you both to join our research program. We're not interested in leaving Kepler 442b, Marcus said firmly. Our agreement with the Colonial Council specifically protects our right to remain here. Blake's smile widened. Oh, Mr. Chen, I think you misunderstand. We're not asking. We're informing you that you've been selected for mandatory participation in matters of galactic security. The communication cut off and alarms began blaring throughout New Geneva. Marcus could hear the colony's defense systems powering up, but he knew they were no match for military-grade starships. Verdant, can you protect the colony? I am trying, but their ships are using corrupted versions of my own biotechnology. They know how to disrupt my systems. Verdant's voice carried a note of pain that made Marcus's chest tighten. Marcus, there is something you need to know. Something I have not told you about my past. The display screen shifted, showing images that Marcus had never seen before. Ancient Zephyrian cities that dwarfed anything on Kepler 442b, vast networks of living buildings that covered entire continents, and at the center of it all, massive structures that pulsed with the same energy signatures he was seeing from Blake's ships. These are the core consciousnesses, Verdant explained. The oldest and most powerful of my kind. For millennia, they served as the central nervous system for Zephyrian civilization, coordinating the activities of millions of house consciousnesses like myself. What happened to them? They were stolen. 300 years ago, human explorers discovered one of our abandoned worlds and found the core consciousnesses in hibernation. Instead of leaving them in peace, they harvested them, trying to unlock the secrets of our biotechnology. Marcus felt sick. Are you saying humans have been experimenting on your people for 3 centuries? Not humans in general. A secret organization that has been studying Zephyrian technology in facilities hidden throughout human space. They have been trying to create artificial versions of the bonds we form naturally, using coercion and biological manipulation instead of mutual consent. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. That's what those ships are running on. Enslaved Zephyrian consciousnesses. Yes. And now they have come for us, because our natural bond represents everything they have failed to achieve through force. Outside, the first of Blake's ships was descending through the atmosphere. Marcus could see New Geneva's defense platforms firing at it, but their weapons had no effect on the organic armor plating that flowed and shifted to absorb the impacts. Administrator Reeves to Marcus Chen. Came a transmission from the colony's command center. We're reading massive biotech signatures from these ships. Are they connected to your partner? Not connected, Marcus replied. But they're using corrupted Zephyrian technology. Verdant, can you disrupt their systems somehow? I can try, but I will need your help. The artificial bonds controlling those ships are unstable, maintained through pain and coercion. If we can reach the enslaved consciousnesses, we might be able to break them free. How? Through the biointerface. But Marcus, this will be dangerous. If they detect our attempt, they will target us specifically. Marcus looked around at the home they had built together, at the thriving colony that had grown from their partnership, at the future they had been planning. Then he thought about the enslaved Zephyrian consciousnesses powering Blake's ships, suffering in bonds that were everything his relationship with Verdant was not. Let's do it. They moved quickly to the biointerface chamber, which had grown into a complex network of pools and organic displays. Verdant had been preparing for this possibility, Marcus realized. The chamber was now configured for long-range communication and intervention. Place both hands in the central pool, Verdant instructed. I will channel our combined consciousness through the bio-network I have grown throughout the planet. We should be able to reach the enslaved minds before the ships land. The moment Marcus's hands touched the water, his awareness exploded outward. He felt Verdant's vast network spreading beneath Kepler 442b surface, root systems and neural pathways that connected every part of the planet in a web of living thought. Through this network, Verdant projected their combined consciousness toward the approaching ships. The contact was immediate and horrible. Marcus felt the screaming agony of the enslaved consciousnesses, their minds twisted and broken by centuries of forced servitude. They had been bound to the ship's systems through biological torture, their natural abilities perverted to serve as living computers for weapons and navigation. But underneath the pain, Marcus sensed something else: hope. The enslaved minds could feel Verdant's presence, the warmth and freedom of a natural bond, and they were reaching out desperately for salvation. We're here, Marcus projected, pouring all his compassion and determination into the mental link. You're not alone anymore. Working together, Marcus and Verdant began to disrupt the artificial bonds. It was like performing surgery with their minds, carefully severing the connections that held the enslaved consciousnesses in thrall, while avoiding the biological booby traps that would kill them if the process was rushed. One by one, the enslaved minds began to break free. The effect on Blake's ships was immediate. Weapons systems failed, navigation became erratic, and the organic armor began to weaken as the consciousnesses withdrew their cooperation. But their success came at a cost. The effort of reaching across space and disrupting multiple artificial bonds was enormous, and Marcus could feel both his and Verdant's strength draining rapidly. We can't keep this up much longer, he gasped. We don't need to, Verdant replied. Look, On the display screens, Marcus could see that their intervention had been more effective than they'd hoped. The three ships were falling out of formation, their systems failing as the enslaved consciousnesses refused to cooperate. Two of the vessels were already losing altitude, their pilots struggling to maintain control. But the third ship, apparently running on more conventional systems, continued its descent toward New Geneva. "This is Director Blake," came a transmission. "Mr. Chen, you have just committed an act of terrorism against legitimate research assets. Surrender now, and we might be willing to discuss terms." "Go to hell," Marcus replied. Blake's ship landed in the center of New Geneva's main plaza, its weapons trained on the surrounding buildings. Armed figures in powered armor began emerging from the vessel, moving with military precision toward Verdant's location. "Marcus," Verdant said quietly, "I need you to understand something. The bond we share is more than partnership. It is evolution. Together, we represent something new, something that neither of our species could achieve alone." "What are you saying?" "I am saying that we have one option remaining, but it will change you permanently. I can extend our bond beyond symbiosis into true integration. You would become something that is neither fully human nor fully Zephyrian, but something entirely new." Marcus could feel the soldiers approaching through Verdant's sensor network. They were carrying weapons designed specifically to disrupt biotechnology, and their armor was resistant to the defensive measures Verdant could deploy. "What would happen to me? You would retain your consciousness, your memories, your essential self, but you would also gain access to abilities that no human has ever possessed. The trade-off is that you could never return to being purely human." Marcus thought about his old life on Earth, the isolation and desperation that had driven him to buy a house sight unseen on an alien world. Then he thought about the life he had built with Ver,